Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this highly anticipated webinar about the latest and greatest addition to Veeam's availability platform, which is the new Veeam Availability Orchestrator. Presenting on today's webinar is myself, Sam Nichols. I'm a member of the Global Product Marketing team, and I'm accompanied by two of my colleagues from the Product Strategy team, Melissa Palmer and Rick Vanover. Melissa, Rick, would you like to say a couple of words before we get started?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me, Sam. I'm really looking forward to reviewing some of the technical details of Veeam Availability Orchestrator and also showing a demonstration.
Yeah, cheers to that, Sam. And we're excited to finally bring this product to market after a long promotional campaign. And I'm pretty sure that the attendees are going to like what they see today.
Absolutely. Well, thank you to both of you for joining me today, and thank you to all our attendees as well. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded, and that recording is going to be shared by email with all of you that registered today. And we'll also actually be hosting it on veeam.com as well a few days after the fact. So anything that you want to review there, that's going to be made available to you guys. To ensure the best audio quality experience for everyone, we do mute you all upon entry, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you, right? We love the interaction, we love questions from the audience, so please be sure to utilize that Q&A window in the bottom right-hand corner of your screens to voice any questions, comments that you may have for myself, Melissa, or Rick. So on the agenda today, we'll just take a quick look at the market and trends specific to disaster recovery, as well as some of the challenges that I'm sure a lot of you on the call are familiar with when it comes to preparing your disaster recovery strategy, your disaster recovery plan. After that, Melissa and myself will dive right into Veeam Availability Orchestrator. I'll take a look at some of the key capabilities, and as Melissa just mentioned, she'll take a little bit more of a technical deeper dive into that. And then both Melissa and Rick will go through a really well-prepared demo for you as well. And then following that, we'll wrap things up with just some licensing and pricing, just so you guys can understand, just how achievable this is to get in your data center. And we'll wrap it up with some Q&A. So without further ado, let's get started and take a look at the market trends and some challenges that have given rise to this exciting new DR tool from Veeam. So we're all now familiar with this concept of digital transformation, right? It has been the buzzword of the industry on everyone's lips for at least a couple of years now, right? And with this digital transformation, your business and your customers are more reliant on the digital technologies and digital services than they ever have been, right? And that's great, but just a single outage of a single application can bring an entire organization's to its knees when we consider this reliance on IT. And when we actually did our availability report at the end of last year with ESG, it uncovered that 66% of enterprises admitted that the digital transformation strategy that their company is tasking them with is actually being held back by unplanned downtime. And when we talk about this notion of downtime, more so minimizing it and recovering from it, just a slim 18% of businesses feel very prepared to recover their data center if they were to be faced with such a disaster. So 18%, it's pretty low confidence levels, and we all need a solution that's going to help combat this difficulty and help minimize, if not potentially eliminate, the impact that a disaster has on our business. Now, when we talk about disaster, we think of something like you can see on the screen here, right? Something that's unplanned, it's accidental, it's natural. So just to put a couple of recent events into perspective, we had a couple of hurricanes that hit the southeastern seaboard last year. Just recently this winter, we've had a few nor'easters up in the New England area. They're wiping out communications, they're wiping out power, the list goes on. But it's really important to note that while this is the first thing that springs to our mind when we think of disaster, disasters aren't just limited to this, right? They can come in the shape of something planned. So, not even malicious, a failed upgrade to a service or an application. Maybe it is something malicious, like cyber attacks, malware. We're seeing these in the news almost every day now. Another example of something man-made might be an accidental man-made, like unplugging a power supply to a rack, right? It's happened, we've seen it. And in fact, it's actually these kind of disasters that we've witnessed more often than those commonly associated natural ones. And we can take a look at some information here from Forrester. We actually see that the first assumption of disaster, something that's unplanned and natural, actually falls third on the list. Right? The incidence of things like IT failure, whether that's hardware or software, power failures, are much more common and far more likely to happen. And it certainly goes without saying, right? Outages do not come cheap. That 2017 availability report I just mentioned demonstrated that the estimated annual cost of downtime for an organization was almost $22 million per year. And you can see here on the left-hand side, bottom left-hand side, just 1 hour of a business critical application, a single business critical application being offline, costs in excess of $100,000. Right? We need to be able to restore these services as quickly, as efficiently, and as effectively as we possibly can, so we minimize that financial impact of disaster. But, finance was just one part of it, right? The cost of downtime is significant and most definitely a key driver, but there are many other effects as well. Losing out to the competition. Let's take, for example, some of the IT disasters that happened in the airline industry over the last couple of years. A few major airlines out there, all experiencing some sort of IT outage. And all the while, those airlines were inoperable because of that IT outage. Customers weren't getting to where they needed to be. Right? They're starting to opt for other airlines to complete their travel. And that's not just for that instance in time. It's kind of a loss of customer confidence that ripples out into future travel decisions. And another big driver to minimizing the impact of disaster is compliance. Right? Even if we never ever face a disaster, we have to prove that our DR strategy, our data, our customers' data, our business is compliant with the regulatory bodies that govern our industry. Right? Especially when we start thinking about healthcare, financial, state and local government, education. So dependence on IT is on the rise, right? It's bigger, it's more complex, and it's more critical to a business than it ever has been. And then these threats are on the rise too. So, we know about this need for digital transformation. We know about the growing data, the complexity of data. We know about the rising threats. We know we have to keep all of that available. So why were the confidence levels so low? Why do people have such little confidence for the solutions they have in place that they purchased and designed to help overcome that disaster and combat that? What are the common challenges? So taking a look at some research from Forrester, first up, documenting, right? Documenting the DR plan is critical to any successful strategy, right? It clearly defines the DR plan in its entirety, and most importantly, it establishes that the personnel, the processes, the procedures to follow in the event of an outage. Now, when we talk about how big our IT environments have become and how quickly they evolve and change, manually documenting this plan can be a really expensive and really lengthy process, right? Again, especially for those larger environments with the continual changes occurring. And that's, again, evidenced by this piece of Forrester research. Just 14% of organizations are updating their DR plans and documentations continually. Next challenge is testing. Testing is such a critical component when it comes to actually ensuring and proving preparedness. Only 19% of organizations surveyed by Forrester admitted to running a full test of their DR strategy more than once per year. Right? So just one day out of the 365 in a year, that they know and they're confident that their DR strategy is prepared to go, ready to go at a moment's notice. This is a really unacceptable frequency, again, considering that reliance on a constantly changing IT environment. So why don't they test enough, right? Well, testing is difficult, right? It's difficult to run frequent end-to-end testing for a number of reasons, but especially because it's typically a manual operation, right? It takes time and it requires resources. And we're not just talking about personnel and time resources, we're actually talking about physical resources within the environment that the business is running on. No one wants to slow down or even halt the productivity of their end users just to run a test. Or even worse, they don't want to run a test, make a change, test something, and then have that data leak into production, and that in itself can cause a disaster. And then the final key challenge is the actual execution of the failover in the event of disaster. Right? Most organizations are struggling with this because they're dealing with tens, if not hundreds of different applications. They're spread across multiple thousands of VMs, and some, if not a lot of these VMs all have dependencies on one another. So in the event of a failover, all of these need to be verified and they need to be powered on in perfect sequence. If I power on VM number 233 after I power on number 234, that can bring my whole recovery to a halt, right? So again, these kind of manual processes, they're just too time consuming, they're too error prone, they don't scale with the size of the environment, and they certainly don't help with the tolerance or the decrease in tolerances for downtime. So it's this market and these challenges that have led us to develop new Veeam Availability Orchestrator. It's this purpose-built solution that's just specifically designed to help you ensure not just the continuity of your IT services in your business, but also the compliance of your disaster recovery strategy. And Veeam Availability Orchestrator is capable of achieving this by being this highly automated, resilient orchestration engine built for replicas powered by Veeam backup and replication. And it's going to help organizations satisfy those compliance requirements, but also minimize downtime and ensure the continuous delivery of production IT services. And it kind of does that through three kind of key components, three core capabilities of the product: documentation, testing, and the ability to reliably recover. And it's these documents, these tests, these recovery capabilities that are going to help you know your plan, prove your plan, and execute your plan. So let's take a little bit of a dive into these before I hand you off to Rick and Melissa. First up, knowing the plan. We do that through what we call dynamic documents. Veeam Availability Orchestrator is capable of automatically creating and delivering in-depth documentation on a scheduled or an on-demand basis, and that's always including the most up-to-date data, like production fresh data directly from your environment. This kind of thorough documentation is great for knowing all the people, all the processes, the procedures, all of those that are required for not just committing to and executing a failover, but for adequate preparation before a failover is even thought of, right? And that includes proving compliance. Again, the compliance aspect of DR is often overlooked. I mentioned industries like healthcare, finance, state and local governments. That kind of documentation can really be a job saver for people that are tasked with proving that their disaster recovery strategy is compliant. These documents are going to help you do that. So the documents are available in 4 different flavors. First up, number 1 is what we call a definition report. So this report is automatically produced on a daily basis, and it documents the entire DR plan and its components. That includes data like which applications, which services, which VMs are included within your plan. If those change, it details what changed, right? What it changed from, what it changed to, who it was changed by, when it was changed. So really granular information that's critical to have. Number 2 would be the readiness check report, right? That sanity checks the entire DR plan, and that's comparing the configuration within the report against the status of the DR environment itself. So this is a fantastic piece of documentation for ensuring an up-to-date executable plan, right? One that is viable and ready to go at a moment's notice. And then we have 2 types of execution reports, one for test failovers and the other for real-world failovers. Right? These reports are generated upon the completion of either, and they're great for evaluating the plan and proving recoverability, as well as highlighting areas that might need some attention. So next up is proving the plan, right? Proving the plan it will work through testing. VAO makes it really easy and efficient to frequently test your entire plan automatically on a scheduled or an on-demand basis. Now, the testing actually leverages the power of a very mature Veeam technology. Well, it's now called Veeam Data Labs, for those more familiar with Veeam. That used to be called Veeam Virtual Labs. And the great thing about these data labs is that testing within them has no impact on production systems, right? That was that leading reason behind why people don't test frequently enough. So if we can mitigate that impact on production and allow you to test more frequently, it allows you to prove your DR plan, your DR strategy more frequently. So just to dive a little bit more into Veeam Data Labs for those that aren't as familiar with them, in a nutshell, it's the testing of exact replicas of your production data in an isolated, non-destructive environment at the DR site, right? Typically, the DR site is just sitting there, it's receiving the replicas, and it's just waiting to go, right? It's kind of, I don't want to say sitting there idle, but for all intents and purposes, it is. So why not put that DR site to work, right? And we can do that through the testing. Everything is mirrored. That includes things like network configurations, so we can really achieve real-world testing for you guys. And the great thing is, again, no impact on the production environment. It's not going to impact or slow down your end users. And again, that's just because we're putting that DR site to work, which otherwise kind of just sits there. So those data labs are great, and they are incredibly powerful and insightful, but they still require resources, even if they're the ones at the DR site. We do actually have a second type of testing in VAO that leverages the readiness check reports we discussed just a couple of slides back, and that truly is zero impact testing. So just to reiterate, we check the configuration within the report, within that document, check it against the state of the actual DR environment itself. And that is a really, really fast, easy to do test at a moment's notice. So if you ever have kind of the CTO, the CIO knocking on your door and you want to just run a quick test at this moment in time, the readiness check report is a great way to do that. And then finally, actually executing the plan, right? Executing the plan for a fast, efficient, and successful recovery. VAO has the ability to quickly and reliably restore services in the event of a disaster, whether that is a single application, whether it's a single site, whether it's multiple sites that are experiencing outage. VAO is capable of handling all of those situations. So we say reliable recovery, and that recovery is not reliable just because we documented and tested it. It's because the actual failover itself is orchestrated, right? We orchestrate the entire recovery process. So it still takes that human intervention to commit to failing over an application or site, but once doing so, VAO is going to handle the rest, right? It's going to verify applications and VMs are there. It's going to verify that they're in working order. It powers them up in perfect sequence. It's going to re-IP all the traffic to the DR site and everything in between all of that. One really powerful part of that orchestrated failover is that application verification piece. And we do enable you to verify any application that's critical to your business. We ship with some predefined scripts. Those are for applications like Exchange, SQL Server, SharePoint, IIS. But again, any application that you want to orchestrate, you can verify that by importing your own custom PowerShell scripts. So just before I hand you over to Rick and Melissa, just wanted to just give a quick visual of a pretty simple architecture of how VAO is working. So, we've got an example of orchestrated replication here. You can see in the center, it's Veeam backup and replication, that Veeam-powered replication that's taking the data from the production site to the DR site. And then living at the DR site is Veeam Availability Orchestrator, right? That's where it's going about doing its business, where all the plans are, and it's going about its day-to-day business. It's planning, it's documenting, it's testing, as we spoke of just now. And disaster strikes, right? The whole production site goes down, right? Whether that's a storm, fire, flood, the organization makes a decision to commit to initiate and failover of that entire site. It's triggered via Veeam Availability Orchestrator, and it handles the rest. All the mission critical VMs and applications are being orchestrated. They're brought back up online in perfect sequence. Everything's re-IP'd, and the IT service is resumed as normal. The DR site becomes the production site. And then crisis averted, everything's ready to resume at the usual production site. We then use VAO to sync all of that new data that was created at the DR site back to production, and then orchestrate that failback as well. So that's kind of a worst case scenario. Typically, we normally see a single application or group of applications going down. So I've just illustrated that here on the screen for you as well. Exchange goes down. We use VAO to trigger the failover. The DR site now becomes the production site just for Exchange, while the other applications, SQL Server, SharePoint, IIS, anything else running your business is still being handled at that production site. So that's a brief overview of the new Veeam Availability Orchestrator solution. I'm now going to hand you off to Melissa and Rick to take a look at those technical capabilities and do a demo for you guys. Melissa, Rick?
Great, thanks so much, Sam. So we're going to dive right into some of the technical capabilities. Let's start with recommendations for starting something like this. You want to get involved in setting up orchestrated DR for your environment. So my advice is always to start with one small application. Get it 100% right, get your people and processes down. Then once you have that one application working 100% end-to-end, start with another one, a bigger one, and eventually you'll be able to protect all the applications in your environment.
Yeah, this is really important because especially if those attending the webinar have had some experience with Veeam. VAO is a little bit different, and then when we were preparing this content, we thought, well, we have to kind of explain how it's different, and this recommendation will really guide you through success.
Now I want to talk about some use cases for this Veeam Availability Orchestrator and some key terms. Some of the terms you might be familiar with if you're already familiar with backup and replication, but some might be a little new to you. So as we've talked about, disaster recovery, something happens, a natural disaster, a malware attack, and a planned migration. You know we're going to have building maintenance or you need to move your data center. These are two of the most common use cases we think about when we're thinking about an orchestrated disaster recovery product.
Well, and the thing I like the most here is this planned migration because it can be very much a non-reactive motion. And what I mean by that is I've talked to a lot of companies that are building new data centers. Dare I say they're finally getting rid of those old designs that they've had. Well, VAO is actually a great tool to actually move everything to this new platform, this new design that you've made in a nice environment. So, problems as well as modernization efforts can both benefit from VAO.
And here's some use cases that work great with VAO that you might not be thinking about when you're thinking about disaster recovery. Patch and testing. How many times in the last year have we had to go do an urgent patch in our environment because there's some kind of exploit or malware out there and we need to protect ourselves? We can spin up a completely isolated application, test it, make sure everything is right before we continue on to production. And then IT security audits. If you're in healthcare or state or local government, if you're a financial company, if you're publicly traded, or if you just even have internal auditors, this could be really important and make it a lot easier to perform an audit. Again, we can spin up these applications in an isolated environment, do whatever we need to do, break whatever we want to break, and we haven't impacted production at all.
And this is important because VAO, for those of you familiar with Veeam, is a little bit different in that it's very application specific. We'll get to the specific how that is set up in a second. But if you think about your most fiddlesome applications in your data center, it's really hard to patch and more so to test patches and updates and changes to those applications. The same thing goes for security tasks. Having a safe place to do that is something that really every organization can benefit from.
So let's talk about some key terms within VAO. First of all, we have multiple planned components, and these are all the things that are going to be put together to make your orchestrated DR solution. Something that we're going to work with heavily are virtual machine groups or VM groups, and we're going to base this off of vSphere tags, which I'm going to go into more detail in a few moments. And then most importantly, the planned steps. So what do we need to do here? What steps do we need to take? We need to test everything, make sure it works, but we might have existing DR scripts that we're using today or verification scripts and validation scripts that we also need to run when we bring an application up.
Yeah, these components are really built on these two things, which are really important. And I would highlight that the steps on what needs to happen, it's really extensible. And I need, those of you attending the webinar to really get creative because we've had some, dare I call it fun, coming up with ways that we can actually let VAO manage things outside of just like a VMware virtual machine. And we'll get to that here in just a bit.
So we've talked a little about data labs. These are our environments that are completely isolated that we can spin up, verify everything works, and do any kind of testing we need to. And then in addition, in the event of an actual failover situation, we need to make sure that we're protecting our virtual machines and our applications in the DR site. So what we can actually do is create a template job in backup and replication to use to make sure we're backing everything up just as we would in production.
Yeah, this is a big oversight for a lot of organizations that kind of build their own DR, I'm using my hands and air quotes in the sky. If they build their own DR by hand, they actually might omit this, meaning once I've failed over, the rules don't really change on the data I have, but it has become production. Can I ensure that that data is now backed up as well? And that's something that's built right into VAO.
Exactly, Rick. One of the things we've talked about is the failover plans. And the failover plan is what's going to put everything together. We're going to use our VM groups built on tags. We have our steps we're going to need to take, whatever credentials we need. Then we talked about our backup and application options to protect our data after failover. And then one thing Sam mentioned that's really important and a great feature of VAO is documentation and reporting, which I'll show you during the demo. We're going to have documents that say exactly what happened, what was successful, and what might have failed in the event of either a test or an actual failover.
And this is important because the documentation is really important in that it bridges the gap of the application parameters, like who are the stakeholders, who is the decision maker, who has the decision authority to say, yes, we're going to fail over this application. And then these reports go all the way down to the different site names, different virtual machine names, and different resources in the infrastructure. It's really important to have that connection from the business down to the application.
So I've mentioned vSphere tags a couple times, and I just want to take a moment to talk about them yet again and why they're so important. Now, I remember back in the day, vSphere 2.5 and 3.0, that was our first forays into virtual machines and virtualization, and we would put all these really descriptive notes in the notes field, like this VM is part of XYZ application and it belongs to so-and-so. vSphere tags is kind of the next generation of that. We can create our tags and have them say whatever we want. We can have multiple tags on a single VM. So for example, I might have a tag that says, daily backup, and I might have a tag with the application name that I'm going to use to power VAO. And those tags are put into categories. So I might have an application category and have all my applications in that category. I might also have something like a regulation category. Is this is this a GXP application? So I might need to tag what's regulatory and what's not. Now, the key thing when thinking about VM tags is to be intuitive, right? A great example is DR Tier 1 app name. So I clearly know this is the DR of a Tier 1 app, and I know what application it is. And a bad example is sample tag. I'll show you some of the tags I have set up in VAO later. Some are great, some are not so great.
Yeah, and I think tags are a really powerful framework that a lot of people haven't correctly and properly exploited with VMware, because it can extend to all other things, like this app is production, this app is subject to audit, this is in scope of this is tier 1, this is subject to DR. So if you're not looking at VMware vSphere tags, really the right time to start looking into it.
Thanks, Rick. Now let's talk a little bit about the VAO architecture and some of the components. So VAO is a site-based model. You have one DR site and as many production sites as you need to. You might have 2 production data centers, you might have branch offices, however you want to classify a site you can do with VAO. The key is though that you have one DR site where most of your activity is going to take place. There's 2 roles within VAO which we'll dive deeper into, and that's an administrative role and then a role for an application owner, and then granular delegation within within VAO. So that's where we use our VM groups and our data labs and the other components of our recovery plans. So site administrators, these are the people that are going to need to set up and administer VAO. So they can also create failover plans, but beyond that, they're going to do the initial configuration and they're going to add and remove users as needed. So this is your true administrator role in VAO. Failover plan authors are in charge of writing failover plans. So this is a type of role we might delegate to application owners. So let's say I have an application and I have 3 main application owners. I can make them all failover plan authors within VAO. And I can do this for as many applications as I need to.
Yeah, these roles are really important because they really allow an organization to have the infrastructure and the app teams kind of in better communication for how their DR plans are to be made.
So VAO has a number of components embedded in it. First of all, there's an embedded backup and replication, but there's also an embedded Veeam 1, and we're going to use Business View to really use those VM groups and to pull those vSphere tags. This is going to make everything very dynamic, so as we change things within vCenter or our vSphere environment, it will automatically change within VAO.
And you know, the vSphere tags, that's going to come in through Business View, which is part of Veeam 1. And those of you who have read some of the materials that we've put out about VAO leading up to this, there's an embedded Veeam backup and replication and an embedded Veeam 1 system. These are actually, especially Veeam 1 Business View, this is used specifically to roll those VMware tags into VAO. So this is a critical component that, again, works backwards in your infrastructure to have it identified, classified, and tagged right so that you can have a good DR experience.
Thanks, Rick. And we've mentioned our data labs. So we're going to use things like our Sure Replica technology to ensure that A, our virtual machines are backed up and they're working correctly and they've been replicated. And B, we're going to use this for things like our testing of patches and our security audits. We're going to spin up that isolated environment that looks exactly like production, but isn't production.
And this also is important to note that this Sure Replica technology is quite mature. You know, those of you following Veeam for the years have known that we've had Sure Backup technology. Well, the backup part of it has a different performance profile. Generally, your backup storage isn't as performant as on-premises production infrastructure. But what we're doing here with these data labs, this is your DR infrastructure. It should be spec'd at a production class. And so when we offer this capability of automated testing, this is a refined engine that is running on performant equivalent infrastructure as your production. So you really do have this ability to do the testing and the security and the patch tests that you might need to do. So this becomes really something you'd never expect from a quote unquote backup company. And it's a really powerful gateway to other things.
Thanks, Rick. And once again, we talked about our templates and our reports, which are fully customizable. I'll show you an example of a customized report. And it's great because we can put, things like our application owners and the decision makers in each report. So for my application, I might say 2 of the 5 following people need to sign off on the plan for us to launch it, stuff like that. And this can get emailed to all our stakeholders, and there's detailed logging behind it. So custom steps. A lot of people already have backup scripts and things they know they need to do to either verify their application or bring it online correctly. The great news is we can do that right in VAO. So we can have VAO execute PowerShell scripts for whatever we need to do to bring up our environment.
Yeah, this is a really good gateway technology, lack of a better word. And what I mean by that is that the custom steps, which we'll show in a second, can really go out of band of the virtual machine infrastructure. And I had a good number of good questions from Ryan. Thanks for that. Keep them coming, Ryan. But basically, for example, sure, we're orchestrating the replication of VMware virtual machines, but maybe we need to tell Active Directory an application, and let's go farther and say it's physical. It's not even a virtual machine. But maybe we need to tell Active Directory to change this DNS CNAME, or tell this physical application to switch over to its own production versus DR environment. And where I'm going with that is because this is extensible through PowerShell, you can use this as a gateway to so many other things. I was talking to one individual very familiar with a couple of hyper-converged platforms, and they say, well, yeah, there's a PowerShell script to even fail over a cluster, right? So the ideas are coming. I even used Python when I was playing with it in the lab, and I was able to manage, believe it or not, a Twitter account. So you can really go far and beyond the virtual infrastructure. And so I think at this time, it's going to be a good time to go ahead and take a look at a demo. So I'm going to pass the presenter rights over to Melissa, and she's going to drop that in. And while we do that real quick, we had a couple questions here. Another one from Ryan. What about the service provider and cloud offering? Right now, that's not a supported target yet, Ryan, but those types of things are planned. Stay tuned, and once you download, drop your comments in the forum, the Veeam forums. Every comment there is looked at by R&D. That's going to be a really good way to help us prioritize these things.
Thanks, Rick. So This is what VAO looks like when we log in. And as you can see, I'm logged into my DR site, and I have a couple of production sites connected to this. I think I saw a question about, so let's say I had one site acting as DR for another site. What you would do is you'd have a DR server in each location and a production server in each location, and you would connect site A to the site B DR and site B DR to the site A to kind of get that traffic flowing between the two sites. So the great thing about VAO is it's so easy to get started with. As soon as I log in, it kind of suggests what I should do to get myself up and running. First, I want to take a look at configuration, and I want to show you some of how those VMware tags come into VAO. So I have my VM groups, and here's my 3 sites I told you about. I have 2 sites in my DR site. And what it's going to do is, in a moment, it's going to show me those different tags I have. And like I said, you might have a tag based on applications, tags for regulatory. What you'll see in here is I'm doing my backups based on tags. So I might have a daily backup tag or a every 8-hour backup tag, something like that. Rick, do we have any other questions online?
Yeah, a couple other questions came up about licensing, which I went ahead and dropped in a license. Mr. R dropped in a question about how's it licensed? And it is licensed per virtual machine, and I kind of answered what would probably be the next question. And I pointed out a scenario, and that's if an organization has, say, 1,000 virtual machines in their environment, it's very possible that only a slice, or say 20 or 40, would need this type of availability, and we'd only need 20 or 40 or whatever licenses for VAO.
Thanks, Rick. So now you can see my tags within VAO, and these are all the tags I set up in vSphere. If you haven't worked with vSphere tags before, that's also very easy. You can do it right from the web client, or you can also use Power CLI to do it. So here's an example of a bad tag. Application's important app. Well, that doesn't really tell me anything. It just tells me it's important. Here's a better tag, application, Helium run Windows. Here's a VAO DR plan based on Helium run. And then again, I have a backup only for my tier 1 tags right in here. I also want to go back out of the configuration now and show you more about some of the reporting that we do. So if we look at reports, we can see I have some successful ones, which is great. We want to check on a regular basis that everything's working like it should, and we can even schedule those checks. So my first report was based on a template I customized. So I have my Aperture Laboratories tier 1 application availability. And what we're going to see as we scroll through this report is that everything's working. And I also have said that, I have my site owners in here, Alice, Bob, and Jane, who is responsible for each site. And then I can see that everything's ready, everything's licensed, and we're good to go with this, which is great. That's what we want to see. We want to see everything green. Now, unfortunately, we did have some issues when we were setting things up where, something wasn't working quite right. So what we're going to do is take a look at why this didn't happen. How are we doing on questions, Rick?
Oh, I'm typing a lot here.
You're typing a lot.
Yes, I am. One just came in from Nick about what about VMware licenses? Do you need a VMware license on both sites? And a real quick story there. It saved me a lot of typing, Melissa. So good timing. Nick, we do need vCenter on both ends. However, there is a use case of the single vCenter VAO implementation with 2 sites, and let me explain it briefly. Simply put, maybe you put vCenter in the DR site, but it's managing the production site. So in that situation, you would have one vCenter, but I would recommend ideally completely separate. So something like 2 vCenters, so therefore you'd need that licensed as well. It doesn't always have to be as big as production, because remember, not everything needs this type of availability.
Thanks, Rick. So here we have another readiness check. And let's just scroll through this real quick and see what happened here. And as we scroll, we see the instructions for customizing the template, because this one hadn't been customized, and it'll walk you through things you might want to work on. And then I see that my my test isn't ready. Something's wrong. I'm not going to be able to fail over. So let's dig a little deeper and see what's going on. I can click here, my plan group, and I see there's something with my VM. So I'm just going to click the VM name. And it's going to show me everything that VAO tried to do and what it might have failed on. So in this instance, it failed because the replica VM was already powered on. So that tells us right there what our issue is, and it shows you how easy it is to fix. This is a great troubleshooting tool as you're working on that first application. Now I want to show you some failover plans. So let's take a look at some I have already working and queued up. Do we have anything else we can answer, Rick, to save your fingers from typing?
Well, Eric just dropped in a good question. I'll read it out loud real quick. Eric had said, can a VAO failover plan test virtual machines in multiple VMware clusters as a VM group running each replica in their respective cluster? Yes, Eric, it can actually. So I'm assuming, let's say that a production site has multiple vCenters. Let's introduce linked mode so the categories and tags go between. The Veeam One Business View that's embedded can handle that. Again, that's rolled into VAO as VM tags, and from there you can build this up. You know, when we look at the demo and how we set this up and how we prepare the webinar, we don't want to make it overly complex, but Eric, we realize these situations are going to happen. So when we build these plans as such, you know, you definitely can build them that way.
Thanks, Rick. So as we can see, we have a failover plan here, and we have a number of VMs that we're going to be taking care of. And what's really great is it shows us our steps right here, but then when we look at our actually VMs, it shows us what we're doing on each VM. So for example, we're going to process the replica, we're going to check the heartbeat, and then we have an out-of-band step here that we're going to need to run. And if we take a look at our out-of-band step, I put in a note that this PowerShell script was for our DNS changes, so we know exactly what we're going to be doing. If I wanted to add more steps, I could do that. And the great thing is we have a bunch of stuff that works out of the box. I know someone earlier had asked about Exchange, so we do have some built-in Exchange tests that we can do to verify everything. Now I want to hop up to my backup and replication console and show you a little bit about how the embedded backup and replication works. So first things first, you see right here, I have my VAO template backup job. This is my backup job that I'm going to be using to protect my virtual machines in the event of a DR situation when I'm running in failover. It's very important to protect those, and I just configure it like I would any other backup and replication job. I also want to show you what's going on in my environment. So if I look at what's happened in the last 24 hours, I can see that I've had some things going on. So I have some backup and replication things happening. Obviously, they're from my Windows machine that I was backing up and replicating before. And then I have my virtual lab deployments. And these are things that VAO is actually doing, these virtual lab deployments. Those were triggered from VAO. These backup and replication jobs are what I've scheduled in backup and replication. But VAO will actually connect to backup and replication and do what it needs to, you know, spinning up a virtual lab or other orchestrated tasks. And then finally, I want to show you my replication jobs that I have working. I have my Helium Run Windows replication job. I just want to show you what it looks like real quick because I'm actually doing my replication job based on vSphere tags. Once again, I'm using vSphere tags throughout my environment completely just to make it easier to work with and easier from an application perspective. When you see this little tag right here, that means I'm backing up all the virtual machines. In this case, I'm replicating all the virtual machines that are tagged with this vSphere tag. So Rick, what other questions do we have? That's about all I had for our demo today.
Yeah, really a good one just came in from Ricardo. He had said the question was, does it support storage-based replication as well? Now, this implementation of a replica, and this goes into Royce's question, this replication engine is completely agnostic to VMware, no storage requirement. In fact, in this lab, we're using a SolidFire, a vSAN, and a couple other products. On the target, we could have something completely different, right? So you have a wonderful experience of agnosticism. But Ricardo, if you have one of our integrated arrays, like from IBM, NetApp, HPE, Dell EMC, I'm probably forgetting one, Nimble, Pure, Infinidat, those have just come out recently, Ricardo. You can actually use our storage integration there and get that storage snapshot engine is part of our replica. That's available as well, but it's not a storage-based replication. However, you have a completely agnostic opportunity as well. So in my personal opinion, you have the best of both worlds. Now, to my team here, to Sam and Melissa, I'm going off script. I want to show you guys something. Based on one of the questions that came up, I want to start with a picture. I've gone to my enterprise PowerPoint presentation here called Visio. I have a box. This is all of my data center. Some of you had questions, and this is why I wanted to bring this up. Where does VAO sit in the mix, right? So if I have all of my data center here, I might have a rule that everything gets backed up, but there might be different levels. Like, for example, the orange and the red and the yellow, and they might have different rules. So imagine that everything in my data center is this big block, but like this first tier, that needs VAO type of replication and then be backed up every day once you fail over. And then maybe this gold bar, I can get away with once a week being backed up. Imagine a visual of something like this. This is a capability you can do with VAO because, again, not everybody has that need for everything to be so full-blown orchestrated DR off-site. I think a lot of organizations might look something like this, you know, the gray, we don't even need replication, but everything's backed up on premises in the primary site. Just think of kind of a view of something like that, and totally went off script there, Sam, set you up a little bit, but hopefully that gave everybody a good sense of some of the technical capabilities of VAO.
Thanks, Rick.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice little visual there, Rick. It does. It kind of does tee me up for this licensing piece, and just want to thank both you and Melissa for that wonderful demo there. So yeah, we have received a few questions already about how is this licensed, how is it priced, right? So let's take a look at that. So as far as pricing goes, we do license Veeam Availability Orchestrator on a per VM subscription basis. So with that, you're not just getting only the flexibility of subscription licensing, but you only have to orchestrate the VMs that are critical to your business. So this ties in really nicely to Rick's visual, right? Maybe you have 1,000 VMs across your whole environment, but only 200 of those are mission critical. They need those really, really low RPOs, that orchestrated failover. Buy 200 licenses, right? There doesn't have to be parity between your VAO licenses and the licenses that you have for Veeam backup and replication. It's only for those VMs that you want to orchestrate. In terms of pricing, you know, they start at just $120 per VM per year. That's for a 1-year subscription. And then we do offer discounted 2 to 5 year subscriptions as well. Most popular being 3-year, and we offer up to 20% savings there, but discounts do run up to 25% for the even longer subscriptions. And as with all Veeam licensing, 24/7 production support is included for the entire duration of your subscription. So let's just start to wrap things up a bit, right? So just give a real brief summary of this presentation. So it's no secret, that buzzword, right? Digital transformation is at the forefront of the large majority of businesses, if not every single business, right? Everyone's being tasked with it. However, you know, as that business and we as consumers of other businesses become more and more reliant on a digital experience, that impact of outage it becomes greater than ever. And again, that shrinking tolerance for downtime. And then in tandem with that, you know, the more data that we're storing digitally, the greater the risk of falling out of compliance should there be a loss of data, a loss of customer data. So, you know, solutions that are out there that are helping minimize that risk of downtime, while also, you know, helping enable IT compliance are becoming increasingly critical to multiple businesses, right? You know, we highlighted a few examples like healthcare, financial, SLED, but it's not just these, it's everyone. Everyone has some kind of data that probably needs some sort of orchestration. And VAO is a great solution for that, right? And again, it's through that fully documented, properly tested, and reliable and compliant disaster recovery plan. So while Rick and Melissa did, you know, an absolutely wonderful job about VAO, it is an incredibly powerful tool. There is so much to explore, and there's nothing like getting your hands on it. So I really encourage each and every one of you on the call today to head over to veeam.com/availability orchestrator, and there you can find a completely free trial of VAO for 30 days. It's fully functional. It does include Veeam Backup and Replication Trial too. So if you're not already a Veeam customer, but you want to get familiar with this, we're going to give you everything in that free trial that you need. So again, head on over to the website, download it, start playing with it. We know you're going to love it. And also, Veeam On is just around the corner, right? Veeam On 2018, please join us in Chicago. It's the second week in May. There are a lot of main stage presentations as well as 60 breakout sessions to explore the latest and greatest that Veeam has to offer. You can go and get your VMCE certification if you haven't already. There's many other solutions discovered as well, not just Veeam-based, but from a number of our partners, VMware, Microsoft, HPE, IBM, Cisco, NetApp. You can also connect with fellow experts. Rick and Melissa will no doubt be there, meet them in person, as well as network with your IT peers and other industry leaders, right? It's a fantastic opportunity. It's without a doubt the best industry event for availability. We know you're going to love it. So register for that today. So if you have any more questions come in. Oh,
yeah, we
sorry.
did. I just decided to add something again, Rick, off script again. Speaking of Veeam On, I just confirmed from the event team, and just for those who are out there, we're going to have 3 breakouts on Veeam On. Melissa and I are going to do one, like where we have a journey. You're going to start with an overview of Veeam On, and then you're actually going to have 2 other breakouts, or overview of VAO. And then you're going to have 2 other breakouts that are actually going to go super deep with the R&D team on some of the capabilities. So you don't want to miss that if you're thinking about it.
Absolutely. Do we have any other questions? We've got 9 minutes. I know we've had an interactive crowd.
We have a couple of questions around things like licensing and stuff like that. So one is that is this solution compatible with Veeam Backup Essentials? And also, does this only work with Enterprise Plus? Maybe you can answer that, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms, it does have to be either Veeam Backup and Replication or Veeam Availability Suite. And we do require the Enterprise Plus just because there's the necessary APIs present in the Enterprise Plus edition that VAO needs to interface with. If you're not already an Enterprise Plus customer, you can upgrade just the specific VMs that you want to orchestrate to the Enterprise Plus edition. And that's obviously not just going to unlock Veeam Availability Orchestrator functionality for those VMs, but all of the other goodies that the Enterprise Plus level has to offer as well.
Thanks. And we have a couple questions about tagging. When we were talking about tagging, it is for vSphere tagging. So that's vSphere compatible at this point. And at this point, we aren't using Hyper-V for VAO. We're not supporting it right now. What other questions?
Yeah, one thing to add on the Hyper-V bit, though, that's planned. And
Yes.
For those of you who are wanting that, the thing to watch is the moment we drop Sure Replica for Hyper-V, then this is going to click into place, right? So we kind of need that first. Those of you who are in the Hyper-V space know that we have Sure Backup for Hyper-V, but we don't have Sure Replica. Once that comes into place, then VAO is the route is paved for that to come into play.
Thanks, Rick. And we had someone asking about, so let's say I bought my however many VAO licenses and I like more. Absolutely, you can buy more licenses as you need to. And the solution's pretty scalable. We're talking hundreds and thousands of VMs here, so as many as you need. We can have that work in your environment. And Sam, a question for you. Can I move the licenses between VMs? Can you talk a little bit more about the per VM licensing?
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely license portability. So, you know, if you purchase 200 VMs worth of Veeam Availability Orchestrator and you used all of those licenses on 200 different VMs, and then all of a sudden you decided that, you know, 10 of those VMs within that plan no longer needed that, but a different 10 VMs do, you can just take those virtual machines out of the plan and put the new virtual machines in. There's definitely that portability there. So as the changes of your business, the changes of your environment occur, this product's flexible enough to cater for that too.
Thanks for answering that for us, Sam. And we have a couple more questions here as I scroll through the chat. What kind of RPO can be offered by using VAO? I hate to give the answer of it depends, but a lot of that's going to depend on your environment because underneath we're using Veeam Backup and Replication. So it's going to come down to what kind of bandwidth do you have between your sites so we can set up that replication job. Do you want to add any more to that, Rick?
Yeah, so the actual data mover is Veeam backup and replication. And in the best of situations, when we have the storage integration, like we have with NetApp, HPE, oh boy, Dell EMC, Infinidat, Pure, there's a lot, friends, as well as the direct NFS integration. When we have that storage integration, I'm very comfortable conversing in the sub 30 minute for RPO. Maybe even sub 15 minute, especially, imagine that red bar that I had. If it's a really small bar, we could probably do a lot tighter for a smaller amount. And then if we want to talk about the recovery time objective, failing over a replica is very quick because it's not restoring the data, it's just powering on that replicated VM. So that's where one of the plan testing capabilities are very valuable. It's going to give you a complete expectation of how long this is going to take, because that's actually a very big ordeal. When you think about DR, a lot of people don't really realize it does take some time to fail over. So the recovery point and time objective, as long as that's in line with the expectations of your business and you can document and test that it's going to make it, VAO can cover you on both ends of that. And to the next question that isn't asked yet, Veeam have announced the CDP capability. That is one thing that would really help deliver a shorter RPO. And again, once that folds into Veeam backup and replication, watch for that to fold into VAO.
Thank you very much, Rick. Somebody wants to know what the web address for the orchestrator is. You'll receive this deck after the webinar, and I'll have the link for download. But if you just go on the veeam.com website, you'll see VAO right there, and that'll link you to the download. And like we mentioned, there's a 30-day free trial.
Oh, there it
should
is.
Be up on the screen.
There you go,
Veeam.com/availability-orchestrator.
I think we covered most of our questions at this point.
Christy dropped in one about Oracle. Is this going to work for Oracle? So, Christy, two answers of yes, by the way. So the first answer of yes is if you have it as a virtual machine that's supported for us to back up, we can orchestrate that DR over to the DR site. And then even if it's a physical Oracle server that Veeam's not even backing up, and it's doing Oracle level replication to a DR site, our custom script engine can actually make a call and manipulate the TS names Aura or call to the app. And as long as it can be scripted, we can even tell that Oracle server to stand down and let the other one become production. The custom script engine is a gateway to this incredible capability here. So two answers of yes. Okay, well, we did our best to go through a number of questions. And again, you guys are going to get a follow-up email here, and a number of you have already asked for direct follow-ups. Appreciate that. And on behalf of the global Veeam product team, would like to thank you today for attending this Veeam Availability Orchestrator launch webinar. And that's all for us, and that concludes today's webinar. Thank you, everyone.